Hi everyone and welcome. In this recording, I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming full moon taking place in the sign of Cancer on the 17th of January 2022. Before I get to the astrology part, I know that this is a special day for someone, so I would like to wish that very special someone a very happy birthday and also a massive thank you. So let's get to the astrology part. This is like, every single full moon, a highly emotional energy, but there is a twist. On one hand, it is the sign of Cancer, so it is the home of the moon where it is extra powerful. The other big thing, and this is almost with surgical precision, where the sun is tightly conjunct to Pluto, which means that the moon is going to be opposing the conjunction, the meeting of the sun and Pluto. And whenever the sun, just like Mars, meets another power player in the sky, it adds a combustion to it. And if we take a look at the symbolism of the sun, Apollo, which has so much to do with light, truth, clarity, it is the king of the sky. It is the very source of our existence. It is the light of our consciousness, while Pluto, it is the deep inner truth, the planet of psychoanalysis, also the shadow. It depends how we look at it, of course, but to me this immediately says that this is going to be an energy which one way or another will invite all of us to look at something, a deep emotional truth, maybe of psychological nature, maybe to do with the past, perhaps childhood, perhaps a reality check of where exactly it is that we stand in our lives, because Capricorn, ultimately, it is the backbone of everything. It is the top of the sky, so that is what holds us together, both literally the spinal cord, but at the same time figuratively the inner structures of our lives. Not just merely our principles and ideas, but also how we live that out, living by example. It is also the sign of mastery, and we all enter into this physical incarnation to master something, to prove something, to show something, to do something with our souls, basically. And since it opposes the moon, it projects a Plutonian light on the moon. Well, this is going to be a moment when we have to process something on an emotional level, and chances are we might not have a great deal of choice in this. This is the kind of energy where any kind of bypassing, even spiritual bypassing, psychological bypassing, mental bypassing, is definitely not going to work. And at the same time, because the Sun and Pluto are pretty close to Mercury and Venus, both retrograde, even though Mercury is in Aquarius still, whatever this event reveals to us, well, it also has something to do with the Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde theme playing out in our lives. Whatever happens on this day, of course, give and take a week, because a full moon has a sphere of manifestation of a week before and a week after. This will lead us to clarity. This will be something that will ultimately help us make our big choices, our big decisions on whatever this Mercury and Venus retrograde are wanting for us to change, to transform, to redo, to rethink, to refeel. So we need to be crystal clear with our inner structures, our own rules and regulations that govern basically our lives and everything in it. And of course, we will, one way or another, ask ourselves the question, how do we feel about it? How do we feel about a person? How do we feel about ourselves? And the retrogrades, of course. How do we feel about the past? And how is whatever happened in the past contributing to the future that we are creating as we speak? Also, on the same day, Uranus is standing still in the sky, preparing to go retrograde. So that means a highly rebellious energy. That can also mean that whatever deeply emotional state we are in is greatly amplified by Uranus, and it is rebellious in nature. I would expect, this day, the 17th, to be a day of tears. Water sign, Cancer, the ruling planet, the moon in it, with a highly powerful Jupiter and Neptune in fellow water sign, Pisces. So this might be cleansing tears, tears of release, tears of happiness, tears of joy, or tears of deep, deep, deep sorrow. But regardless, tears wash away. Tears release the pressure. Whenever we cry, it is almost like a gesture, a symbolic act of being reborn. So regardless of how this plays out in our lives personally, and I also would like to mention that chances are this energy is not polarized. This is not where it's either black or white. This is like a mixture of everything. Even if it plays out in the most wonderful way, as in tears of joy and release and completion, finally I achieved something, or finally I'm clear with myself, or I accept myself. Well, that is based on a lot of sadness, a lot of pain in the past, recent past, whatever the trigger is for us personally. And even if it's like a tear of sadness or pain, that was very happy once, also in the past. Cancer has always a lot to do with our past. It rules our upbringing, childhood, our family members, the emotional values we received from our parents, grandparents, basically our family, and at the same time it rules our ethnicity, our culture of origin, and everything that we basically inherit from there. Based on this, ultimately, the best possible expression of how this full moon can play out for some very lucky few people out there is finally finding and feeling in a deeply resonant way where exactly they belong, who they belong to, family, community, or simply a state of being. This is belonging, and finding either comfort in this or perhaps a shocking truth, Pluto, that it needs to change, or certain cords on a very deep level need to be severed. Also, whenever Pluto and the moon oppose each other, of course this happens every single month, but this is still a full moon where the sun is closely, by the degree almost, conjunct to the sun. So this can also be an emotional shock, but one that we need to process there and then. As I said, it's not polarized. It can very well be happy, but sometimes even happiness is a shock. And I know this by very, very personal experience. I'm one of those people if I get a happy kind of shock, a happy surprise, it does the same thing to me as if I would receive the worst news in the world. It just destabilizes my emotional world totally. It shatters me. But that is also an act, a gesture of looking into the mirror. Another really, really important energies that is taking place also around the 17th, 18th of the month, so very close to this full moon phenomenon, is the nodes of the moon shifting into Taurus and Scorpio axis. And this is where perhaps it is the south node into Scorpio that is more relevant, because that is a deeply, deeply emotional energy. And that also means that the south node is going to trine the moon at 27 degrees of Cancer, So it's also a pretty energetic full moon. And that means a lot of emotional charge. That means a very strong psychological energy. And chances are it does have something to do with the past. I do believe that because it opposes Pluto, Pluto is really, really good at changing our lives forever, where there is no way going back. So this can also be a very, very good thing, because for some people this can turn into that big, big moment of release when they get rid of whatever has been tormenting their souls, a memory, a trauma, their own self-sabotage, anything of this, the toxicities, the Scorpio. And also the North Node in Taurus, this is a new beginning, at least from an emotional and psychological perspective, where we go back to minimalism, North Node in the sign of Taurus. Now, of course, exactly because the nodal shifts, this can also be a material, financial energy, which might have to do with values, which might have to do also with perhaps love or sexuality, South Node in Scorpio. Perhaps for some people this is a moment of coming out, whatever that means for everyone personally. For other people this can be having that courage to strip off the mask and show themselves for who they truly are, with the wound, with the weaknesses, with everything that we might not necessarily like about ourselves. This can be a massive moment of honesty, maximum honesty from some people, and it is their honesty that might actually shock another person. So this is how this full moon phenomenon can be connected. One person reveals the truth and other people get shocked by it. Also, at the same time, this moon holds a quincunx, a celestial conversation, which links together two areas of life, two energies that have apparently absolutely nothing in common. So there is a strong element of surprise here, because Mars is at 25 degrees of the sign of Sagittarius, which means it is conjunct the galactic center. This might be a massive surprise from the universe, where we might also need to take some action without too much hesitation. For a lot of people, I do imagine, based on the symbolism of Cancer, that this might be a moment when they decide that they want to swap homes, they want to leave their home, including their physical home, the city that they live in, their local community. They want to leave a shared accommodation, a shared household. Or when they decide exactly the opposite, to move in with someone, they decide to trust someone, or they decide to accept help from someone that they've been perhaps very, very hesitant about. This can be also a really powerful moment when people decide, emotionally mostly, that they quit. Whatever this quit means, of course, quit their job, quit their careers, quit a relationship, quit doing something, quit a hobby, quit perhaps something that they already learned to master so very much that it doesn't mean that much to them anymore. Or for some people, they might come to terms at this time that they burned out career-wise or whatever, hobby-wise, any activity-wise, relationship-wise, it can be absolutely anything, and that the flame is not going to be rekindled by anything or anyone, because that is the nature of Pluto. However, something will definitely take its place, because this energy is set up exactly in that nature, because when the nodes of the moon, the line of destiny basically changes signs, something does enter to take the place of the old. And perhaps even if that is very hard to accept and to do and to move on, this is where we have to embody our wisest selves and know that perhaps whatever new is coming in our lives, even if we don't even know how we feel about it right now, it can turn into a bigger love, bigger passion, bigger attraction than whatever we are quitting. Also, the quincunx with Mars. Perhaps we might have to muster a certain kind of courage that we never thought we have inside or within ourselves and do something so very brave, so very bold, perhaps so spontaneous that it might even shock and surprise and delight perhaps us. Or we might have to decide to face an awkward situation regardless. Now, another aspect that this full moon holds is that the sun and also the moon form a T-square with Eris in the sign of Aries, goddess of discord, goddess of rebellion. This might play through as we having to choose our own sovereignty, even if this choice might send our lives, perhaps the lives of others, the lives of our family members, Cancer, into chaos. But never forget, out of chaos something is always born. Now, if we want to make this even more complicated, it's not just a T-square, it can also be seen as a cardinal grand cross, one of the most intense energies in astrology, because we also have another power player, the dwarf planet Haumea, at 29 degrees of the sign of Libra, so that is a cardinal grand cross. And what this means from a personal perspective is that we might not have a choice, we might need to destroy something, quit and face the truth, whatever, but also co-create, create at the same time. This is where it's not a one-sided energy. Whatever ends, something new has to begin. Because ultimately Haumea is the dwarf planet of creation, fertility, in a very mystical quantum way, mind over matter. But this is where it's not the lower mind, it is not even the Uranian kind of mind, it is beyond, it is basically our most divine selves that might express a gesture, an act of creation through this dwarf planet Haumea. As an interesting fact, I would just like to mention that Haumea spins so fast around her own axis that she has an egg shape, in physical reality of course. So how very symbolic is that egg, the symbol of life, the symbol of creation, symbol of fertility, something new, a new life, new hope can arise from that egg. And chances are, we have been sitting on that egg for a long time, heating it, giving it life, nurturing it, and now perhaps whatever was in it is going to be born. Now, from a collective perspective, this is unfortunately a totally different kind of picture, because this spells rebellion, strong opposition, protests all over it. Cancer, it is the people. Moon in Cancer, the collective emotion, the collective sentiment, the collective feeling, or better said, resentment. And it opposes Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, patriarchy, centralized power. To me, this is misuse of power. And also because the sun is conjunct Pluto, revelation, big secrets are coming out about the misuse of power. This is also a really strong financial and economical energy. What happened to the world economy really? What have they done? Centralized power, the leaders of the world, big organizations, big corporations with the finances, with the money. And this energy is definitely going to reveal what was the real business, what was the real transaction, what was the real intent behind this. And when I say this, well, it can mean the pandemic and everything that has to do with it, the economic up and down, the crisis, the fuel prices are going to skyrocket in such a way that it will leave us in a state of shock. And you can imagine what will people do. Strongly rebel and protest against this. But Pluto can also be seen, especially during an opposition, as the planet of compromise. So perhaps this is the moment when centralized power, Capricorn, Pluto in it, is going to turn against the big energy companies because it has no choice. So this might mean a punch below the belt for the big companies, because ultimately centralized power need people and their happiness, their satisfaction, cooperation, much more than they need any big company. So this spells war within centralized power and organizations because of the pressure of the people. But ultimately, this is a cardinal grand cross, which means the world stage. Eris, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, whenever something happens in that part of the sky and it's something really relevant, a big celestial conversation, not a minor energy. Even though even a minor energy has significant news. For example, if Mercury does an interesting aspect in a cardinal sign, that means something, a news, communication, information, reaches the public eye, world stage, etc. When Mars is there, well, that is when things get really, really heated up. When Venus is there, depending on where she is and how she behaves, it can mean, like, for example, a new international superstar is born. It can mean something related to finances, money, economy. It can also mean that values are initiated, new value is being born, or a value is being transmuted, let's say, into a different expression of itself. But when there is a cardinal grand cross, even if we might consider that Haumea is just the dwarf planet, but so is Pluto. And this reminds me of how Pluto was integrated into astrology, because it was around the Second World War when there was the Hiroshima bombings, a gesture and an act of infinite cruelty, the truth. Because what that gesture meant was that we as a species are exactly like that. It basically held the mirror. We are cruel and unforgiving, unkind, beyond anything that we could have imagined about ourselves as a species, I repeat. So Pluto was not integrated fully into astrology until then. So astrologers could not figure out how Mars, the planet of war, could do something like this. As in, of course, we're not saying that Mars did it, the planet Mars or the energy of Mars did it. It was just like a clock showing that it's time for war, but Mars wasn't in that aggressive position where it could possibly do something of this nature. So then they looked deeply and they found that Pluto was there, and Pluto became the higher octave, the greater expression of this Mars. So basically, when Pluto is strongly activated, and right now it's in the end degrees of Capricorn, it is slightly anoretic, something big is definitely going to happen on the world stage. Eris squares Pluto, Eris opposes Haumea, and Eris is a stronger planet than Pluto. Eris is actually further away from the Sun, she has more mass and a slower orbit. Everyone alive today on the planet has Eris in Aries. So she is a powerful karmic energy. She is the fighter for liberty. She is the fighter for sovereignty ultimately. So I think her symbolism in itself already predicts what is likely to happen around this time. But of course, maybe the 17th is going to be a day of maximum tension, but that will change, that will reverberate everywhere, especially that it is the Pluto return of the United States. So that is strongly activated. Pluto on Pluto, the Sun on Pluto. along with this Cardinal Grand Cross, well, something perhaps of economic nature because or value systems, because it is the second house of economy, values, etc., etc., and also their tradition, their core values and principles that might, of course, it won't change immediately, but this is when the moon, it is gonna come to everyone awareness that urgent and very, very profound change is needed, or else. And when the or else, it is equally clear both to the governors and the people, that will mean action. That will mean that something is going to be set up without a shadow of doubt. Now, another expression of this energy which can impact the collective is floods, danger of floods, the destructive element of water, Cancer, the moon pulls on water, and because Uranus is stationary at this time, that's earthquake, that is earth events. It can also represent a really tough and powerful storm. It can also represent a sudden and chaotic change of temperature that might be the destructive element. It can also represent tsunamis. It can also represent a big technological accident that might, of course, shock everyone out there. But of course, this is my suggestion and my advice. Well, our personal lives will be as turbulent as possible because our emotional world is going to be strongly stirred up at this time. So if we possibly can, we should detach from whatever is going on in the world out there, because this will be a moment when our own personal issues, regardless if it's good news or bad news or something miraculous and wonderful happens or perhaps the opposite, will be more than enough. And we don't need any more doom and gloom here. And another big warning, there is also a spiritual aspect to this, because at this time Jupiter is in its home sign of Pisces, along with the co-ruler Neptune. So this energy can expand deeply self-victimization. If possible, we should not see ourselves regardless of what is in our lives. And I know for some people it is so hard. It is almost impossible. But at least around this time, we should rather look at ourselves from the eagle's perch and see that we're actually surviving. We're trying our hardest. We are fighting the Herculean battle with our challenges, obstacles, limitations, and even conditioning. The Saturn and Uranus square out there, where Mercury is close to Saturn, so it is one-way part of this square. Mercury squares its higher octave Uranus. So this will definitely mean that there will be massive disruptions in communication, technology, travels. Expect electronic equipment to not really play by the rules. And of course, shocking news, because that is the Mercury and Uranus square. That time is up. We need to do something. Even if we cannot take like a physical action or something, then we need to brainstorm or soul search or whatever. What we may not do is stagnate and self-victimize, because Neptune and Jupiter will drown us. Jupiter is at the beginning of the sign. Neptune is at the end of the sign. So that's like being between the hammer and the anvil, and we don't want that to be expanded and amplified, because we'll just drown ourselves emotionally. We'll do a lot of damage to ourselves. Of course, to be that very optimistic is definitely not going to be an option, because overindulging in positivity and optimism and believing strongly in fantasy is also not advised, because Mars still holds the square with Neptune, and at the same time, because the moon activates this water energy in the energetic degrees of the sign, its home sign of Cancer. Again, I must say, be very, very careful with escapism, especially substances. alcohol, drugs, psychedelics, or anything that can become lethal if, we use it excessively, like an overdose. Be very, very careful with this. And also, like always, this is an emotional cocktail which will stir up our hormones greatly. So if you are in pain, emotional pain of course, if you are feeling totally lonely, totally lost, if your mind is playing tricks on you, to say it directly, Neptune in the third decan of Pisces is about undoing ourselves, which in its higher expression is changing our lives for the better, of course, and cleansing our souls and our emotional worlds from the toxicity, scorpionic decan. But in its lower expression, well, we all know what that means. So please reach out, because this Jupiter in Pisces once every 12 years, so we don't get this every time, is about mercy. It is about compassion. It is about when people, everyone basically out there, can show an incredible power of compassion, mercy, choosing to do something so wonderful, so meaningful, so big, basically Christ consciousness, that's what we're talking about here, that they will save people. So yes, this might be a dangerous energy for those who suffer from depression and, heartbreak, anything like that. But at the same time, the other end of the spectrum, Pisces, a mutable sign, dual sign, other people will be very, very empowered to help, to save lives, and to do for another person in need, a vulnerable person, that which might be almost unimaginable at any other moment. So there is help out there. There is kindness, there is charity, there is empathy out there. So please don't suffer alone, reach out. Mercury squaring Uranus. The simple gesture of speaking out your pain, your sorrow, that which hurts your soul deeply, is gonna do miracles. Of course it won't heal you, but the pressure is gonna be released. It will prevent the finishing blow. It will inspire you to be at least a little bit hope. It will ignite that tiny spark of hope. Mars conjunct the galactic center. Basically the mind of the creator, the very essence of the creator, Mars, planet of action, and Mars the activator. This will also be a moment of miracles for some people, when the miracle is not something, let's say, supernatural, is another person, perhaps a stranger, perhaps someone who you would least expect it, holding your hand and telling you, we are gonna go through this together. And needless to say, any kind of spiritual gesture, prayer, meditation, or simply speaking to your soul, speaking to your unconscious, asking yourself questions, or telling yourself how you feel, self-compassion, self-empathy, can also be a big game changer. You can save yourself. You can be your own Christ, your own Messiah. So what I'm telling you is, regardless of how painful this may feel, or for some people how incredibly confusing, or how incredibly emotionally shocking, and as I say, this will stir up hormones 100%, know that as Jupiter will whiz through its ancient ruling sign of Pisces, in the next couple of months, it will heal, but before Jupiter can heal, it has to dissolve. It has to separate the clean water from the pollutant, from, the scorpionic toxicity, the poison. So before it gets better, it will hurt. But this is the good hurt. This is when, symbolically speaking, of course, the tumor is being cut out. This is when the bad tooth is being pulled out, freeing you from pain. But you need to be aware of the pain and just how big it is, because if Jupiter just heals you passively without you being aware of it, then karma gains nothing. You gain no wisdom. You lived the pain through for no reason. So that's why right now all of us are going to be reminded of our pains. Of course, this is the theme of the next 18 months with the South Node in the sign of Scorpio. But this is for the better, because this is not just putting salt on our wounds. For example, like in November 2021 with the Taurus lunar eclipse, being on the demonic star Algol, where it sent so very many people into the deepest depression of their lives, especially people who have very low self-esteem, inferiority complex. So it's not that type of energy. It is the type of energy where, yes, we know that it hurts, but we are releasing, we are finding solutions. The nodes of the moon, they can be seen as the dragon. The north node is the head of the dragon, that which is the orientator of the being itself, while the south node is the anus, so to speak, where all the excrements get out, the release, the purification. But of course, if you'd like to find out more about what the nodal shift is going to do for us collectively in the next 18 months of our lives, I'll try and have a separate recording with that special subject. So this concludes today's recording. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. And again, I cannot help myself but to say there is always hope. It doesn't matter how bad the situation looks. And I know that some people out there got really, really ill, anxiety, but such an uncontrollable anxiety that their mind is literally destroying them. Yet still, even if right now it is impossible to have faith or even to control yourself, know that there is always hope. All of this is for a very, very, very specific and important reason, where it's you and your creator pulling in the power of chaos into your existence, into your being, to do that which until now was absolutely impossible for your life, for your being, for your identity, for who you are. Because this is the only way that we can actually experience a massive world change. The world cannot change on its own. The people in it have to change. And that is how chaos feels like. Absolute anxiety and uncertainty. But that also means implicitly that your limitations are being literally destroyed, demolished, burned away. And let's think a little bit rationally here. When an anxiety, when a strong state of total restlessness has no explanation, well, you can imagine that something is taking place in your neurons, and it is exactly the neurons, physically, chemically speaking, where our limitations are. The thought, the trauma, that is chemistry, that is a chemical substance in the neuron in physical reality. So maybe that is purging out. Maybe that is being dissolved. And of course, the body will react in this way to it. So don't give up hope. Give it time, because this is the moment of chaos, yes. But it is up to us, our unconscious especially, that will create order from that chaos. So for a lot of people, this year especially will be a massive life change that is beyond our imagining. And when Neptune and Jupiter meet in the sky in April, I do believe it's either 12th, 13th or 14th, something like that, the shape and form it will give to chaos, the pattern basically, well, it will be based on our deepest aspiration. So that's why we need to hold on to hope right now. So thank you again for listening. I wish everyone a blessed full moon. Until next time, bye for now.